Today we are here to announce that federal legislation has been introduced in the United States House of Representatives titled the Leandra Wai Act of 2022, which formally begins the federal legislative process to demilitarize and return Makua Valley to the people of Hawaii. With me today are community members, including Sparky Rodriguez of Malama Makua and other community organizations who have fought for decades to ensure the return of Makua to the people of Hawaii. I also welcome state leaders, Senator Maile Shimabukuro, Representative Cedric Gates, Representative Daniel Holt. Also here are representatives from Earth Justice, the national nonprofit public interest environmental law organization that has worked side by side with Malama Makua and other Makua community organizations for decades to protect this sacred valley. This legislation is a step towards righting the decades worth of wrongs committed against Native Hawaiians and Hawaii's environment by the United States military. Makua is a sacred site, rich in cultural significance and biological resources. It is a site in one of Native Hawaiians' most important traditional oral histories, the mo'olelo of Hi'iaka o Kapoli o Pele. For hundreds of years, we have written about Makua, lived in Makua, practiced our culture in Makua, and loved Makua. Decades of military occupation and live fire training have inflicted serious damage to this aina and the people to whom Makua is so important. Beyond the environmental degradation, the military occupation of these lands have cut off Native Hawaiians from full access to cultural practices and the living touchstones which ground Native Hawaiian identity. The assault on our traditional practices and beliefs must stop now. The Leandra Wai Act, number 1, requires the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the state, to conduct an extensive study and determine the cost to fully remediate Makua, from our beaches to the depths of our valleys, of all unexploded ordnance, land hazards, and contaminants. Number 2, it transfers the 782 acres of federal lands in Makua back to the state of Hawaii. Transferring this land to the state of Hawaii will ensure that the cultural integrity and significance of Makua is protected and respected. And like Kaho'olawe, we can have a further conversation of a Native Hawaiian entity that may one day be able to take custodial care and stewardship and management of Makua Valley. Finally, the bill establishes the Makua Trust Fund to carry out the provisions of this act and requires the Secretary of the Army to conduct consultation with Native Hawaiian organizations while prohibiting the restriction of access while provisions of this act are being implemented. There is perhaps no better place to introduce this bill than in Thomas Square. This was the place where in 1843, the legitimacy of the sovereign kingdom of Hawaii was restored after the illegal seizure of the kingdom by the British Royal Navy. Right here, where we stand right now. King Kamehameha III, also known as Kaui Keauli, stood with Admiral Richard Darton Thomas to preside over the transfer of occupied lands back to the native people of Hawaii. It is from this park, in 1843, those famous words were said, "Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono." The ea of this aina is perpetuated in pono, in righteousness, in justice. Nearly 180 years later, these words still ring true. We must continue to pursue righteousness and justice for Native Hawaiians, our local communities, our environment, and our future. And as this is also Women's History Month, we are proud to name this bill for Leandra Wai, an incredible Native Hawaiian woman who dedicated her life to peace and the protection of Hawaiian land and culture. For it is not enough simply to remember the powerful women among us. We must say their names. We must elevate their work. And with the introduction of this bill in the United States Congress, we lift up Leandra Wai's name and recognize her as the extraordinary aloha aina that she was. And there is no perhaps better day than today, on Kawi Keauli's birthday, to recommit to his words. And today we must begin to do what is pono, what is just for Makua. Let me be clear, the United States military does not need this land. They do not need Makua, just like they do not need Red Hill. This bill is a reminder to the United States military and the Army that they work for the people of Hawaii, that they are accountable to the people, and that they cannot continue to harm our land and cultural resources unchecked. It is my honor to introduce this bill today. Mahalo for joining me, and aloha.
Mahalo, Congressman Kahele. Also here today is Hawaii State Senator Maile Shimabukuro. She currently serves the Senate District 21, which encompasses Kalailoa to Ka'ena Point.
Mahalo, everyone. You know, my stepfather, Dr. Fred Dodge, was one of the founders of Malama Makua, who, so grateful to David Hankin and Earth Justice, hired Earth Justice to bring the lawsuit against the military to provide environmental impact statements, to stop live fire training. And I'm just so grateful to Congressman Kahele for bringing the Leandra Wai bill today while my stepfather is still alive. He's in his mid-90s. He would be here today if he could. Unfortunately, he's too elderly, but I can't wait to go home tonight and tell him the amazing news. And I know he's going to cry tears of joy when he hears what's happening today. So I'm just so grateful to be here, and I'm just so glad that this event is finally happening. And I think it really was meant to be. That is the day that we're also honored on Kamehameha III. It was all fate. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Senator Shimabukuro. Our next speaker represents District 44. It includes Makua, Makaha, Waianae, and parts of Maili. Please welcome Hawaii State Representative Cedric Gates.
Aloha mai kako. It's an honor to be here with you all today, especially on this special day as we lay Kamehameha III. And I want to give a special thanks to Congressman Kahele for bringing us all here together to unify around getting Makua back for our community. Me and Senator Shimabukuro have introduced bills year after year to force the military to engage in these conversations of returning Makua back. And the only way we were going to be able to expedite that is through a congressional act as such as Representative Kahele is introducing today. Because as we know, the leases are coming up and we're all wondering what's happening next. And to have a path forward that is being written in paper and in stone in my heart, that this is the right approach that we need to really bring the attention and the energy and the mana to be able to actually get it out of the grips of the military's hands. As we've seen, our kupuna year after year, decade after decade have been fighting to return Makua back to its rightful owners, the Hawaiian people. And I think that this, again, is a significant moment to be able to really force them to do what's pono. And I want to give a special shout out to all of our kupuna from Makaha and the Waianae Moku who have been advocating to me specifically about these issues educating me on what the needs and why it's so important to continue to press this narrative that it needs to come back to the community. Also, all the stories of the forced evictions, the lost family, the lost kupuna, the lost land that has been polluted over many years. And I know it still remains painful today for many of those who have been affected by the evictions and the land grab that occurred at Makua, as well as Lu'ulu'ule Naval Base, which I think is also in need to be returned back to our community for many different usage. And I think that's what our community is here. And as I look around, I see so many familiar faces, because we all know that we all have to be a part of this movement to make it actually become a reality and materialize. So I'll be here supporting as much as I can, whether it's through state legislation, working with Congressman Kahele and the rest of our congressional delegation, as well as the military, to make sure that it's done right and it's done pono. So mahalo again for everyone being out here today. It's a pleasure to be here. Aloha.
Mahalo, Representative Gates. And our next speaker, representing House District 29, Representative Daniel Holt.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. You know, every year before we start session, the House Hawaiian Caucus polls the members, and we request bills to see what the issues will be for the upcoming session. And for the last few sessions, you know, federal land back issues, specifically surrounding Makua Valley, has taken a forefront. So to be here today, thank you very much to Congressman Kahele. You know, with the announcement of this federal legislation, it's one step closer. And like everybody said, it takes a village. You know, when I met Congressman Kahele, I was a staffer for his father many years ago. You know, and we always knew Kai would be off to great things, but I don't think we both thought that we'd be standing here today announcing such a great event. You know, I don't need to go through what Makua Valley has been through, what Kaho'olawe has been through, what Red Hill has been through, and the fact that we are taking these steps to get these lands back. And it's chicken skin to stand here and for me to be speaking to you folks today. But whatever I can do to help, having such a great Hawaiian, not only a Hawaiian advocate, but a real Hawaiian to be in DC to fight for us, it's amazing. It's amazing. You know, I don't have any words. And to have advocates like Representative Gates and Senator Shimabukuro out on the west side, they bring the problems to the forefront. It's a long drive. Don't worry, they got you guys back. So, you know, thank you all for being here today. I look forward to working on this with everybody, and mahalo.
Mahalo, Representative Holt. And now our next speaker has deep roots in Wai'anae. Mr. Sparky Rodriguez, fondly called Uncle Sparky, is a founding member of Malama Makua. He served as the director, president, and board member. He's also the husband of Leandra Wai. Please welcome Uncle Sparky.
Aloha kako. This is a very special time to honor Leandra, but more so Makua. Our family had the blessing and healing from Makua over decades. And this is what our connection to the Aina is really important for us. The fences that say kapu or keep out, very offensive, very violent. And it creates all this anger because we're losing connection to the Aina. This will help us get that connection back. The Army has allowed us to do limited access with our settlement. And Leandra and Fred are the ones that really kept up the battle for decades. We continue to do the accesses twice a week. Mr. Holt, Vicky Holt Takamini is the kumu that helped us get Makahiki started in Makua. We just finished the closing last week. And making that culturally appropriate connection to the Aina is very significant. How do we do that beyond our location? How do we get more Ohana involved? Just for some clarity, I'm a Vietnam vet, so having the battle, the military, or the U.S. was very challenging emotionally until I came up with the phrase that helped me separate the Hawaiianness from the American upbringing. So I was able to put that loyalty and patriotism in a position where I'm Hawaiian, I'm pro-Aina, I am pro-Hawaiian. I'm not anti-American, I'm not anti-military, but I'm pro-Hawaiian, pro-Aina, and all of the kupuna that came before us, we stand on their shoulders. And Leandra learned a lot from many kupuna, learned a lot from Makua, and I think we all have a chance to learn a lot from having it opened up. And I can envision the day when all the unexploded ordnance are cleaned up, all the toxins are removed and cleaned, where we're able to go ahead and sit and enjoy the food created in Makua, restoring the native environment to include all of the endangered species that are at risk right now from the military, and getting it back to full cultural use, appropriate use. So no development, no hotels, no golf courses, no tourists. This is a special place for us to heal, learn, and move forward. Thank you, Senator.
Mahalo, Uncle Sparky. Our final speaker for today, he is a strong community leader. He's also the Po'okumu for Kawaihono o Kana'auau. Please welcome Kalehua Krug.
Aloha nui kākou. I've seen with my own eyes a cracked water lens cap on Ko'olave. I've seen with my own eyes the bones of our ancestors scattered in the explosions that take place on lands like Makua. I have seen in Halemano, I've seen in Makua, house sites, our sacred heiau, destroyed, used as target practice, painted with white paint. This has to hit home, and I hope that the message this legislation sends, although I feel auspicious, although I feel very appreciative to this movement forward, I'm still very worried, because this legislation is not just important for the people of Hawaii. It's not just important for the lands of Hawaii. This is important, an important movement at the next iteration of Aloha Aina that the rest of the world has to take on. Aloha Aina is something that has to transfer outside of Hawaii to the rest of our planet. That the ideologies that undergird the way that we see our interaction as humanity, primarily through the violence of military, is going to send us to our end. And so as we move through these iterations of Aloha Aina, I celebrate Mahalo Kai for our community in Waianae. I celebrate for the land of Makua, but I also celebrate to the lessons learned, hopefully at the United States Congress and beyond, that Aloha Aina is for us all. Well, mahalo.
Mahalo nui, Kalehua Krug. Now we're going to open it up just for a few questions from the media. Please keep your questions only to the Leandra Wai Act. Congressman? We'll go. Rick?
You know, with the victory at Red Hill, do you think there's some momentum and reception in Congress for support for this bill?
Absolutely, Rick. I think this bill continues to build on, you know, really what I look at as a tectonic shift with the United States military here in Hawaii. What we as a community were able to accomplish, an island community, in really 4 months, from the first incident on Red Hill on Saturday, November 20th, to just a few weeks ago, is absolutely incredible. You think about the struggles for years on Kaho'olawe, the struggles for years on Makua, to have the decision by the Secretary of Defense in 4 months to drain and permanently shut down Red Hill, something that they had resisted for years, is a major deal. And I think what we are going to do at Makua is to continue that conversation with the United States military. And like I said earlier, the military does not need Makua. They have not fired a single round in Makua in almost 20 years. There is no reason for the military to continue to occupy Makua, and it's time to heal Makua, remediate Makua, and return it to the people of Hawaii. And that's what this bill aims to do. There's a lot of anxiety in our community right now, especially on the Leeward Coast, with talks of renewing this lease, extending this lease, you know, public comments, environmental impact studies. There's a lot of generational trauma on the Leeward Coast and throughout Hawaii as it relates to Red Hill and Makua Valley, and that needs to stop now. And this bill puts that into motion, just like we collectively did together on Red Hill.
That being said, I'm assuming the military is going to say, cite current strife in Russia, you know, in Ukraine, things like that, for the need for lands like this. How do you address it?
I spoke to the commander of the U.S. Army Pacific Command about an hour and a half ago. We had a great conversation about this bill. And we both have committed to sitting down and working together with the community and organizations that have made Makua, you know, part of their lives for the last, you know, 50, 60 years to find out what that path forward is. And that's a good thing. When we can bring our senior military leaders to the table to listen to us, to hear us, and to take us seriously, that's a step in the right direction. That's not something that has necessarily happened in the past. So they're open to do it. This bill begins Congress's role as the legislative body of the United States of America to bring Makua back to Hawaii.
Thank you, Rick. We're gonna go over here to Scott, Hawaii Public Radio.
Congressman, are there any time parameters in this bill regarding the evaluation of the remediation process? As we know, the military tends to sometimes draw things out. So is there any sort of time limit that you're looking at to make them do this evaluation?
So the bill, and you can view the bill on my website at kahele.congress.gov. It is posted there. It was introduced this morning at about 6:30 in the morning, Hawaii Standard Time. The bill, upon its enactment, calls for the conveyance of the 782 acres of federal lands in Makua within 6 months of enactment back to the state of Hawaii. But while that process is happening, it triggers the extensive study and analysis of all of Makua, from its beaches to the waters in the nearshore bay of Makua, which we know there is unexploded ordnance there today that continues to wash up on the beach, all the way to the depths of the valley, to figure out the extent of the land contaminants, the hazards, the contamination, the unexploded ordnance that needs to be remediated in Makua Valley. Part of the process was also looking at Kaho'olawe. Kaho'olawe, after $400 million spent, is still largely inaccessible today and has tons and tons of unexploded ordnance that still has not been addressed. We don't want to make the same mistakes that were made at Kaho'olawe in Makua. So working together with Earth Justice and Malama Makua, Hui Malama o Makua, and other organizations, we want to ensure that that does not happen at Makua Valley.
Okay. And then we'll take just two more questions. I'm going to go to Ali, KITV.
Would you like to have Makua become like a state park, or what would management look like?
You know, I'll leave that question to maybe area representatives who have been involved in this issue for their entire time in the as elected leaders from that area, from that Leeward Coast, maybe to answer that question on what the future of Makua would look like.
You know, there's been proposals similar to how Kaho'olawe has the Kirk, Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission, something similar for Makua. So the commission will be set up with a wide, you know, representing various entities that have interest in Makua, that can make a collective decision about the best path forward upon return to the state. So, similar.
Yeah, and along the same lines, our state legislation that we've introduced year after year basically creates a task force to have that conversation, to have that dialogue with all of the parties involved in managing as well as returning the land back to the state, to have that conversation and develop it before the lease is up for the state legislation that we're introducing. But I think now, as we see, it might be expedited, that there's conversation needs to happen sooner than later. So that's what we're hoping will happen.
We have one final question. This will be with Mindy Pennybacker from the Star Advertiser.
Hi, Representative Kahele. Are there monies included appropriated for this process in the bill?
So there is a line in the bill specifically for appropriations, but because we don't know the extent of what that, extensive cleanup is going to be, there is no amount specified in the bill. Part of the required study by the Department of Defense, working together with the State of Hawaiʻi, will determine the extent of unexploded ordnance, hazards, contamination within the Makua military reservation and the outlying areas, and will determine what that cost will be. But we know that Kaho'olawe was at least $400 million, and my guess would be that the cleanup of Makua Valley will be at least that. That was $400 million 30 years ago, in the mid-1990s. And so I think it's going to be pretty expensive. I think it's also important that those resources are utilized in a way that works with community organizations, works with Native Hawaiian organizations, works with NHOs that have expertise and the capacity for UXO removal. But we need to make sure that everyone is included at the table. All organizations are included, all voices are included, and so that it's done in the right way. And I think it's going to be pretty expensive. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes our press conference today. Aloha.
Thank you for coming. Mahalo.